Let's quickly move on now to the match between Akwa United and Kwara United on NPFL Matchday 15, which has been rescheduled by the Interim Management Committee IMC. The game, which was originally slated to start at 4 p.m. on Sunday, April 23rd, has been moved to 4 p.m. on Monday, April 24th. At the Nest of Champions. The league's head of competition, Dr. Johnson Obaseki, wrote in a letter dated April 17th on behalf of the league's head of operations, Davidson Owumi, that the change in date was required because the CAF Confederation Cup quarterfinal game between Rivers United and Young Africans was set for Sunday, April 23rd at the same location. The league's organizers make an appeal to all necessary parties to make sure that sufficient logistics are offered to ensure the match's effective hosting. The league's organizers regret any disruption the club supporters may have experienced as a result of the date change. Talking about a change to the way we do things in our local league. As much as some things change, some things stay the same, and we've struggled with planning ahead our scheduling. Surely, CAF knew when their own competitions were going to take place. And as participating members of the CAF Confederation and CAF Champions League competitions, it would have behooved us to plan our schedules around that, rather than at the very last minute shifting matches, granted just by a day, but next time it might be by 2 days, 3 days, maybe even 7 days. And what about logistical issues? Teams, clubs have to make plans for themselves to accommodate transportation, to accommodate the welfare of the players. You put a lot of planning into the day of, and 2 days before, 3 days before, even 5 days before, those plans get changed. We all know the policy in Nigeria with vendors, no return policy. How is this something that we're still dealing with at this time in our footballing history?
It is something of a major concern, but I think it's something that happens. I mean, in major leagues, in the English Premier League, we've seen it happen time and time again, especially during the time of COVID-19, games were being postponed. These are unforeseen circumstances, and I'm pretty sure Rivers United thought that their ground in Port Harcourt was going to be authorized by the CAF, the Competition of African Football. They were told that could not be a ground where they're going to play the CAF competition stuff. So they had to liaise with the executives right there in Akwa for the Gulf Republic International Stadium to be a stadium where they are to use. I think this kind of things happen. But of course, we don't have the adequate planning in the NPFL, and that should be worked on. But I think in this Rivers United case and the game of Kwara United and Kwara United being postponed, I would really take an action then, because we see this kind of things happen in football, games being postponed because of other fixtures. But this is what happens in England. Let me tell you this. This is what happens in top league. Yeah. Okay. What? So for the start of the next season, this is what happens. For the start of the next Premier League season, the fixtures comes out for about 5 weeks. The intended fixtures, the ones that they know that in the next 5 weeks they are going to play these games for sure. Then before they get to the 5 weeks, they now plan for the next 10 weeks. This is how you see that games comes up later on. The FA Cup comes up, and they have to play Champions League, and then the Europa League comes up. They don't have it all planned out for the.
But of course, Monday, a lot of their rescheduling has to do with unforeseeable circumstances, like one team getting into a later stage of the competition that they might not have been expected to, or that could not have been anticipated. And as you said, they break up their scheduling into phases. But even when they reschedule as early as 2 weeks in advance, maybe even as early as 3 to 5 weeks in advance. So we know what to expect. And by and large, it is for unforeseeable circumstances. Even then, You know, when we cannot predict the unpredictable, it's why we get insurance. Even in the Premier League with the FA and all of the administrations of football around the world, when rescheduling has to take place, there is a compensation protocol in place. We saw with the Champions League Champions League final clash between Liverpool and Real Madrid. Fans have been reimbursed a lot of money for missing the game. Some even got in and they still filed for an opportunity to get their money back. There is a system in place that if the unforeseeable does happen and teams do suffer because they've planned ahead for a certain game to take place at a certain time, and they might suffer some damage or injury because of those plans being thrown out the window and new plans being put in place, there is a system to compensate. There is a system to readjust, because don't forget, in the Premier League, their games get broadcasted. So when games are being shifted, it means it affects broadcasting deals. It affects schedules with broadcasters, and clubs must be certain that their games, which were slated to be broadcasted, and money that would come in from such broadcasting would still go ahead at a later date when they get rescheduled too. We do not have such assurances in our league, in our local football.
Yes, for sure. It is very blatant that we do not have it, and as for our league to develop to the level of the European top 5 leagues, these are things we need to take a look at. And I'm really impressed that you are taking it from this angle. I think it's something we need to watch out for, the logistics, and of course, Akwa United we have to reschedule, and Kwara United, perhaps they had moved to Akwa Ibom already and they have to pay an extra hotel fee to stay. But hopefully they're not in Akwa Ibom already, anticipating that game that will be played on Monday instead of Sunday or instead of Sunday. So that is another angle we should look at. But you know, the IMC, they are still trying to fix things. I mean, the major problems of the league are being sponsors, attracting sponsors. The major problems are getting the league on TV before they start talking about compensating teams for postponement of games. I think that should come as the 5th in my top 5 leagues. My top five of what I want to see in the NPFL as well as Nigerian football in a whole.
Yes, certainly broadcasting, even without a deal in place for broadcasters to compensate teams, if we enter a phase of a temporary armistice where broadcasters are mandated to broadcast matches but without having to pay in order to garner attention from the fan base and to ensure that you can predict that a few thousand people are going to be watching every single match before we enter the next phase where broadcasters would have to pay to continue to capture the viewership of a footballing audience that genuinely wants to see local football played on local TV. But now let's go back to the IMC conversation we were having earlier. How many years do you suppose it's going to take? I know you're not an expert, you're not in the room. We're probably going to get 1 or 2 reports in the future where they will make recommendations. But given the nature of how bad our local football has been, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I want to give them the time to get things right. I want to believe that the effort behind the IMC is genuine to get our football to a stage where it can compete, at the very least, with the league in South Africa, and potentially start to compete with leagues around Europe, even in Asia, the Middle East. How long do we give them to get it right?
I think it's one step at a time. I mean, I think the biggest win of the IMC this season is to ensuring that referees are well taken care of, is to ensure that these referees are being paid their indemnities every match day, to ensure that these referees are well taken care of so that we can have smooth football. Because I mean, last season, season before last, time and time again, we've been seeing struggles with the referees being bribed, and if they don't go by what they agree on, the referees are being beaten, and we get to see decisions going the wrong way. But the biggest win for the IMC this season have been that the referees are being paid, the referees are well taken care of, because believe it or not, referees are a major part, they're a major factor to how good a football game could be. So that's a major win for the IMC this season. I know they talked about, before they started the season, they talked about how the league will be on TV, how the league can be more attractive, but it's a shame that we've not done some other things. But I think it's a step at a time, and we were taking it one step at a time. Next year, I think they should be focused on getting the league to be broadcasted, get more sponsors, ensuring that clubs and players are well taken care of as well. So I think in the next 5 years, our league will get to stand up. But this is what happens in Nigeria. I mean, I can remember back in 2013, the days of Ahmed Musa in Kano Pillars, we used to have a very great league, and we were expecting that in 2023 we will be competing with South Africa. But now this is 2023, and it looks like we've been retrogressing. So this is what we also need to watch out for. There are forces, then there are people who are just in that particular seat of authority for their own interest, for their own selfish interest. So for our league to go forward, for a league to take a good step, a step at a time, and keeps going forward, I think we need to look at our boards. We need to ensure that everyone is putting hands together to ensure that Nigeria have a good football league. Because it's one thing, one person wanting a great league, and another person saying, okay, I'm here for my pockets. I'm here to ensure that, okay, I'm going to be well fed.
I would be most impressed if the IMC mandated that league football clubs in particular be the ownership of clubs in Nigeria be taken away from states' ownership. It would be a tremendous improvement. It would allow for potential money to come in from investors outside of the country, even if we continue to complain that there's no money within the country to go any further for private companies to take up responsibilities for owning, for private individuals for taking up responsibilities for running these clubs, perhaps. Because we see now the English Premier League is so attractive. Every Middle Eastern nation, every Arab bloc wants to have a piece of it, and even local businessmen are struggling to compete to own a stake in these clubs. We need to get to that point.